Hey everybody, this is Christian, and in this video I want to explain how to securely log into IT infrastructure without remembering passwords anymore. And no, I'm not talking about password managers. Today we're talking about passwordless authentication, which becomes a really important standard in IT security. All the magic is happening here in this small key, also called a YubiKey, and this allows me to access all my home lab infrastructure, my Linux servers, Kubernetes clusters, web interfaces and databases. This video is sponsored by Teleport, a free and open source access proxy, and we will take a look at the new passwordless feature that was introduced in their latest version. I will walk you through the installation and configuration of Teleport on a Linux server using Docker, and we go over secure multi-factor authentication with OTP using my iPhone, and later also add this YubiKey here to enable a true passwordless login. All of this is based on free and open source software and open standards, by the way, so this can also work in a similar way with our services and applications, and you can use it in your home lab completely for free. I'm really excited about it, and I hope you are too. So let's do this and let's get rid of our passwords. Before we start, as always, I want to give you some more background about what we're doing and why passwords are weak. Of course, you might already know that when you're using a password like 12345 or something similar, that isn't a good idea. But what if you're following best practices like choosing a random password with upper and lower keys, digits and special keys? Isn't that secure enough? You might think that, but the major problem with passwords is that every password can get stolen. And this happens every day. Phishing attacks are still one of the most common ways how cybercriminals gain access to accounts. So if you get a phishing mail which takes you to a fake login page and you fall for it, you enter your password, it's over. So what can we do against this problem? A great way to harden your authentication is to use a so-called multi-factor authentication. In this case, you need a second factor in addition to your password to log in. So this could be a random number that's constantly regenerated every few seconds and sent to your mobile phone. This is also called OTP, a one-time password. Or even better, you can use a hardware key like this here. I got this one, the YubiKey 5 with NFS, for example. Some you can even protect with biometric information like your fingerprint. Without this key here, even if somebody steals your password, he's not able to log in because he's missing the second factor. So this gives you a much better security than just using a password, and it also allows you to even disable it, because why should we use a potentially insecure factor like a password if we already have a stronger way of authentication? As I said, this becomes more and more popular in IT and is also called passwordless authentication. It's usually using a strong factor like this hardware key here that you can protect with a PIN or biometric information. And this is the only thing you really need to authenticate. No password to remember, you just need this key and your PIN or fingerprint. The software Teleport that we are using to access our IT infrastructure now also supports exactly this, a true passwordless authentication with hardware keys. And it's a very secure way to get access to all your infrastructure like Linux servers, Kubernetes, web interfaces, remote desktop and so on. I've already covered this software in previous videos before, but because there have been a few changes since my last tutorial, I thought I will quickly walk you through the entire setup of a fresh Teleport instance. Doesn't really take long, and what you will need to follow this tutorial is a Linux server and a public DNS provider, because we will also obtain trusted SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt. That's all built into the Teleport software, so you don't need a reverse proxy or anything, but you need at least a DNS record that points to the public IP address of your server, otherwise it doesn't work. And the Linux server should also have Docker and Docker Compose installed. If this is all entirely new to you and you're wondering what the hell is Docker, I've done several videos on Docker and containerization if you want to have a getting started guide. And of course you will also find all the project files for this tutorial on my personal Git repository videos on GitHub. And if you enjoy tutorials like this, please do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the channel. That would be really cool. It's really helping with the YouTube algorithm. Okay, so I guess I've talked enough, but I hope I got you excited about Teleport and you want to try it out. So let's get started and install the free community edition of Teleport on my Linux server in the cloud. I've already prepared this server using Terraform and Ansible, so it's running an Ubuntu 22.04 LTS version with Docker and Docker Compose already installed, so everything is ready to go. But before we connect to this server, I like to create all the necessary project files here on my Mac, because then I can better explain this to you, how to configure Teleport in much more detail, and I believe it's easier to follow. So I've already created a project folder called Teleport Passwordless. This contains one config folder and one data folder. The other two items you can just ignore for now. And first, we need to generate a new config file for the teleport servers that we can place in the config folder. And because I'm lazy, I will use a simple template that we can easily generate with a teleport binary. So to do that, you can just download teleport or simply run it in a container on your PC and just execute it with a specific command. So this will generate a configuration file we can start with. So here I'm using Docker Desktop to run this teleport container on my Mac. This is the full command that I've used to run a new container with the official teleport image in the version 10. The --rm parameter, this will only run this container once. So because we just need it once to generate the config file and then it can be removed. Because I'm also running it on my MacBook with an ARM-based chip, I also needed to add this platform parameter AMD64. Also don't forget to set the entry point and pass a volume into this container. So in this example, I will use my current project folder where I want to write these config files to, and I will mount it into the etc teleport directory in the container's file system. And we will also pass a command into this container. So when I execute this one, teleport configure, this will generate the teleport configuration template and output it to a file called teleport.yaml in this etc folder, and then I should have a new config file. So don't worry when it doesn't generate any output, it still did what it should. So let's open this config file in VS Code because we need to adjust a few parameters before deploying it onto my Linux server. First, I'm changing the node name from localhost to my public domain and the host name that I've used to register the server. So this actually isn't necessary, but if you're running multiple teleport servers, you can differentiate them from each other. The next steps are quite more important, especially when you want to get new SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt. The first thing we need to adjust here is in the auth service, where we need to change the cluster name to the host name and my public domain. And you should also change the listing port of your proxy service, because by default it's running 3080, I believe, and that would mean every time we need to access the web interface, we would need to enter this specific port. So here, when I change the web listen address parameter, I will change it to the listening address 40, so to listen on all IP addresses, but on port 443, which is the standard for HTTPS. That's also important for the certificate validation process, and then you also don't need to specify the port number when you open this teleport server in your browser. I will also add the public address attribute, so this should again point to the hostname and the public DNS record. By the way, in the past some people also asked me how to expose it with a reverse proxy, something like Traffic or Nginx, but honestly, I don't believe this is a good idea, as this makes the configuration far more complicated, and Teleport has also a built-in procedure to obtain trusted SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt. And this is just using the ACMAP protocol, so it's a standardized way to do that. And this can be configured by adding the ACMAP parameter and enable it. So let's just add my business email address here for the SSL certificate information. And that is everything we need to do here. Okay, cool. So now that we have our teleport configuration file, we can move on and create a Docker Compose file that will then run our container. First, I want to add a new service called teleport to this file. So this is the one and only container that we need. And it should run the latest version of the official teleport Docker image. In my case, this is 10.0.2. I also want to run this container as my default administrative user, because I will later put this project in my personal home folder on the Linux server. And I also want to specify the container's name and entry point. And the container should start with this command here. I've just taken it from the official teleport documentation, so just copy and paste it. But what it basically does is it just starts the teleport service with our specific configuration file that we've just created. We also need to expose the ports 3023, 24, 25, and 443. So these ports are all needed for the teleport service to run correctly. The main port, again, is 443 for the web interface, but for the connection between the managed service inside teleport, so like the Linux servers, we want to connect via SSH or any reverse shells, we also should expose all the other ports above. And of course, we also need to mount our config folder we have prepared as a persistent volume into the container's file system. So the left side again is the path on my Linux servers, so where I will place the config file on the host, and the right side is a path where it should be mounted into the containers file system. The second volume here is the data directory. So here Teleport will store all the recordings, the certificates, so everything that is needed as a data source. Of course, you could also put this in a named folder, but I just decided to put it in the same project folder. That's up to you how you do it. Okay, awesome. So we now have prepared everything to run the container. We have a config folder with the teleport YAML config file, the data folder, the compose file. Let's now upload them all to my Linux server. And I'm just using SCP to copy these files into the project folder teleport passwordless, which is located in my personal home directory. And when I open a shell on my remote server, you can see all the project files are there. Now we can start up the container by just executing docker compose up. I'm running it in the foreground here because I want to know if Teleport creates all the certificates successfully. If there is an error, you likely have any networking problem with a DNS provider or IP address because it's using an HTTP challenge on the 443 port by default. And when you got no error here, everything seems to be okay. So the certificates are generated, the data is generated. So now I'm going to stop the container again and restart it in background mode with a -d parameter, and everything seems to be good as well. So the container is up and running and it's exposing all the ports we need. So let's try it and open a web interface in my browser. Then you should be able to reach the Teleport interface via the public address of your server now. And you should also have valid SSL certificates. And this is the login page of Teleport. We could sign in now with a user, but because we haven't created one yet, we need to do that first. So let's go back to the terminal and execute the following command inside the Teleport's container. The command is tctl users add, and this will create a new user to the system. I'm going to give this a role editor. So this is like an admin user role. And I'm going to specify all the SSH login names that this user should be allowed to use. So don't worry about this too much. If you want to learn more about how to use Teleport, they have great documentation about all these necessary commands of this tctl and tsh and how to use that. This is just a very short demonstration here. So if that was a bit too fast to you, just read it on the documentation. You will also find the project files on my GitHub. Just take your time, go through it, and yeah, then let's continue. Okay, so the user has been created now, but we need to set up login credentials for this user first. So let's copy this URL we see in the terminal and open it in my browser. So now we just need to type in username, a password you want to set, and then we also need to set up a two-factor authentication device. And because I haven't configured any passwordless authenticator yet, Teleport is only offering me the OTP authentication using an authenticator app on my phone. So this is always the default. I'm going to use it now, but don't worry, we will set another authentication. I just want to show how it's usually working. So I will give this a name and scan this QR code with an authenticator app on my iPhone. I'm using the Google Authenticator here, that's my favorite, but you can use any other OTP compatible app. Once your Teleport server was added to your authenticator app, it will show you a 6 digits long OTP code, so that's always regenerated a few seconds. Just type it in the authenticator code of Teleport, and now the registration of your user is successful. We can now use it, go to the dashboard, and this is where we can log into our servers, databases, clusters, everything that we have connected to this Teleport service. This might not be new to you if you already know Teleport, but I wanted to give you a brief introduction to it. By default, it already offers you this strong authentication with a one-time password that you can use on your phone. But this authentication still requires on one insecure factor, the password. And the second factor, the OTP, honestly isn't really comfortable to use. So I just don't like to pick up my phone every time and type in the OTP code. As I said, there is a much better and easier way of having a second factor authentication in Teleport, which also offers passwordless login. And this is a hardware key. So to demonstrate this, I bought this YubiKey here, the YubiKey 5 with a USB-C port and NFC. You can just plug it into your PC and it should work immediately. However, I would strongly recommend downloading the YubiKey Authenticator and Manager, because with these applications you can get more information about this device. You can also see the credentials and the keys are stored, you can reset it, and you can also protect this with a PIN. And an additional protection of this key is really important, because let's assume you are enabling the passwordless login that doesn't require a password anymore. You just need this key here. Without a PIN or any protection, this would be a single factor authentication again, and not a pretty secure one, because anyone who has this key can log in. Sure, that might hold all the remote hackers back, but I think it's not unrealistic if you're working for a big organization that somebody wouldn't be able to spoof your identity, find out where you're working, and then just steal this key. If you don't have a PIN added to this becomes a potential risk. A fingerprint might be even better than a PIN, but you need to get a YubiKey that supports biometric information with fingerprints to do that. By the way, if you're trying to add this hardware key in Teleport without a PIN or fingerprint, it's even not possible. I guess this is a bug in Teleport, but given the fact it wouldn't be secure anyway, I think it's not a critical bug here, so that's basically just for your own protection. But keep it in mind, if you want to use a YubiKey in Teleport that supports passwordless, you need to set up a PIN first, otherwise you'll see an error. Okay, so to use the passwordless login on our Teleport server, we first need to enable this feature first. And to do that, we just need to add another section in the Teleport configuration file. So here in the auth service section, we just need to add another section called authentication. And the authentication type in my example is local. So that's because we're using locally created and managed users. The second factor should be turned on. And here we need to add another section called WebAuthn. So this is a different authentication method than OTP because that's required to support these hardware keys. You also need to set up an RP ID, so that can be just your public DNS record. And in the parent section, you can add a connector name, so just set it to passwordless. And this should be all. So we just need to re-upload this config file to our server, of course, and restart the container to make it active. And when that's done, the passwordless login should be enabled on your Teleport server. When you go to the sign-in page and refresh it, you can see that the default login page changes to a passwordless sign-in option. This shows that all the settings have been applied. Of course, we haven't configured any passwordless key or hardware key in my account yet, so we still can't log in without a password. But the good thing is you can always log in with other sign-in option as well. So that's something like a fallback in case you lost your key or whatever. So let's just sign in with a configured option, my account name, my password, and a one-time password from my phone. And now when we're signed in, we can now add this YubiKey to Teleport. Let's do that. To add a new hardware key to your account, just open your account settings and two-factor devices. And let's add a new key here. First, we need to verify with an existing two-factor authentication for security reasons, so don't use that hardware key here, that will not work. We still need to use the OTP Authenticator app, but once we have verified, we can add a new hardware key. Let's also enable the passwordless login for this key and give it a name, something like YubiKey. And this will prompt a verification message by your browser. Note, this will look different depending on what type of browser you're using. So this is a default prompt that the Safari browser is presenting. It will look different for Chrome, for example. So here, this is an example how it would look like in a Chrome browser. And as you can see, Chrome also offers their own type of hardware key integration with Android. And Safari is also kind of special because it allows you to use my MacBook's Touch ID function as a hardware key as well. I just want to say at this point, theoretically, you can use other verification methods supported by your browsers as well. So for example, the MacBook's Touch ID authentication works also in Teleport. So that is why you see this prompt by default. But I don't want to do that now. Of course, I want to use my YubiKey instead of the Touch ID. So I need to select Use Security Key instead. And then Safari is ready to connect to the YubiKey, make sure it's inserted and tap it once. So then you need to enter your configured PIN and tap it again. And that should be all. So here it is. We now have added this YubiKey as a valid authenticator device in Teleport. Let's now sign out and test if we can log in. The login is now very simple. You just need to select passwordless, switch to use a key again, and that asks us to authenticate with the YubiKey. So tap it, enter the PIN, tap it again, and that's it, we are logged in. So isn't that amazing? Sorry, I'm very impressed by this because you don't even need to type in a username. You just need to insert this key, enter your PIN, and that's it. This is so easy, but still much more secure than using a password. And again, you can use it with any hardware key you want. You can even raise the security level higher, get a YubiKey with a fingerprint, and you can use it on every device to securely log into your accounts. If you're using a Mac with Touch ID, you can, by the way, also add this as a second or a third key, of course. Use different types of passwordless authentication devices, or maybe you got a backup YubiKey, you can add this as well. There are many options how you can use this, and I believe this will be the future in IT. I hope more and more services are starting to support passwordless authentication. Okay, so one more thing before we close the video. You have seen the login page of Teleport via the browser, but Teleport also has this terminal application, the TSH client, of course. So how does it work here? So well, it's actually the same procedure like in your browser. You just type in how you want to log in and where you want to log into. And then again, we are asked to use the YubiKey to log in, tap it, enter the PIN, and tap it again. And now we are also logged into the TSH terminal client. So now you can use that to log into all your infrastructure and services you have added to Teleport. As I said, I'm not going over every single feature in Teleport. I've already done another video where I have explained how to log into Linux servers, how you can add new servers or web services in Kubernetes. If you want to check out this video, I've linked you this in the description down below. And yeah, maybe we will do more videos about Teleport in the future, because you can now also use this to log into RDP. That, however, requires you to set up a bit more complex server setup with an Active Directory and a Windows server. So this is another interesting topic we will dive into, maybe a short teaser for my next video. Anyway, I'm really excited about this, and I guess I will set up this in my production Teleport cluster in the cloud and use it to log in to everything in my home lab. This is really amazing, and I hope it was interesting for you as well, and you could learn something. As always, thanks everybody for watching. I will see you in my next video, and take care of yourself. Have a nice day. Bye bye.